I really don't mean to taint the well. Out of all the novels in the series, this is probably the least fun one. It's because, like, it's kind of like the first Harry Potter, where he doesn't really have much character development. I mean, he goes crazy, which is cool. It's cool. But I could probably have just skipped from the first book to the third book, and I don't think anyone would have batted an eye. And I think that anyone that would have known what I was doing would have kept their eyes closed. But on another note, you know, I miss them. I miss all of them. All these characters. You know, they live they live up here. They only come around when I read about them. I mean, I can remember them, but in a way, I think they've all grown on me. Oriole turns up about midday and tells us to pack up and clear out. The mission is going ahead here and now. Without comment, we get ready to do our last weapons checks, pack out ammo, and leave the rest. Having sleeping rolls and camp burners will only weigh us down, so we head offline. We exchange brief waves of farewell with the crew, who are also getting ready to leave. Oriole leads us, unnervingly, through the streets, avoiding the worst of the crowds of the aliens, taking us up the past past the spaceport. He points to a Tau ship standing on the apron, a gleaming white shuttle decorated with large Tau symbols in red. That's brightsword's transport. He's already headed to the battle dome for the inspection. The Inquisitor leads us from the spaceport, and we see another dome out in the desert, linked to the city by a single gleaming silver rail. As we get closer, I see bullet shaped carriages slipping back and forth along the rail, and realize it is some kind of locomotive. That is how we will gain access to the battle dome, he tells us, pointing to one of the transports zooming past. The training drill you performed on the laurels of glory represents the zone of action. Once we are inside the dome, Tross demolitions will provide the distractions we will need to infiltrate the central complex, where the power relays are situated. Once there, Quidlin, Tanya, and Cage, rejoined by Trost, will cut the power to the outer entryways and the rail system. Cutting the dome off from outside, the Colonel, Morik, and I will sweep Ovar out of hiding into Tanya's sights. She kills the commander, and we exit, again to the rail terminal. Strelly, there is a shuttle some 5 kilometers or so to the sunward of the dome, out in the desert, which you will go to. When you activate this, you should be able to see the shuttle. The Inquisitor passes Strelly a small cylinder with a brass rune etched onto its base. Fly back to the dome and pick us up. Once we're on board, we will return to our ship in orbit. I have spoken to Coldwind, and he assures us that the chain of command will be uncertain for a while following Brightsword's death, and that we will do what we can to increase the confusion. That's well and good, says Tanya, watching another transport bullet out of sight. But how do we get on one of those trains? Quidlin curses gently and continuously under his breath as we lower him into the hole. Oriole assures us that the power relays for the travel rail are buried here, and Quidlin simply needs to temporarily cut the power, bringing one of the carriages to a halt. We take the train, switch the power on, and ride it all the way inside the fortified dome. Sounds good on paper, but judging from Quidlin's swearing, the practice is a little more difficult. It took us the best part of an hour to find one of the power conduits, sneaking amongst the desert dunes, in case a fire warrior saw us from the passing carriages and became suspicious. After a while, he emerges, blinking into the bright light, after spending several minutes in the small opening we found, after levering up a panel situated a couple of 100 meters from the rail. I think the power will shut down for a couple minutes, he tells us, dusting himself off and pulling out some oddly shaped tools back into his pack. You think? Mort barks at him. I don't know how timing systems work. They don't even use seconds and minutes. So I'm having to guess, he moans back, obviously aggravated. I couldn't even read the labels on all the switches and terminals. So think yourself lucky I'm not a fried mess right now. So we managed to stop one of the carriages. What then? Asks Trost. I say we kill everybody on board, I tell him, looking around for disagreement. Last chance is right, Trost agrees. Half of us on each side, attacking from front and the back. We storm the place, shoot anything that moves, and wait for the power to come back on. These things don't have drivers. It'll take us right in there. Demolition man! Cage and sharpshooter are with me, the colonel orders us quickly, glancing down the line towards the city, where a dazzle of sun on metal indicates the next transport. The rest of you, with Oriole, keep low, shoot at chest height. That way, we should avoid killing each other. First in with a grenade, I suggest, pulling a frag from my belt. That'll take most of them out in such a tight space. The colonel nods, and Trost chucks one of the frag grenades to Oriole, who passes it to Strelly. What do I gotta go in first? He whines, holding out the grenade for someone else to take it. Because we can always walk out of here if we need to, Flyboy, I tell him bluntly. Oh, gonna walk up to orbit, are we? He says bitterly, spitting out on the ground and stalking away. Oriole and the others cross the rail and wait on the other side, a couple 100 meters further up the route. We don't try to hide. As far as I know, there's nothing the Tau on board the fast approaching ship can do to stop, even if they did see us. You are first in, demolition man, the colonel says, pointing at Trost. Then, last chance and myself. Sharpshooter, you stay here and take out any targets that present themselves at the windows. I see the carriage approaching low, slowing down as it nears us, carried forward by the momentum rather than power, now that it has moved into the section cut off from the energy grid. Like I said, it's bullet-shaped, about 20 meters long, with a row of narrow windows roughly 2/3 of the way up the side. There are no obvious wheels. It glides soundlessly above the rail. It goes past us, moving quite quickly but slowly. As we run after it, it settles down onto the track, its lower parts carving furrows into the sand, breaking it even more quickly. At the back of the carriage, a small triangle of steps leading down to either side. I point Tross to the right-hand flight, and he nods, hefting a grenade in his hand. Tanya peels off to our left, diving prone and taking up a firing position along a sand drift. The hatchway at the top of the steps opens, and the door hisses upwards. A Tau in Fire Warrior's uniform sticks its head out, and the colonel fires, the bullets impacting into the alien and flinging him backwards. With a skill born of years of practice, Trost lobs a grenade straight through the opening, and there's a panic shouting from the inside. The detonation blasts out the back 5 Fire Warriors. About 2 seconds later, an accompanying explosion takes out the front half of the train. Trost reaches the steps first and throws himself up, firing with his lasgun as he jumps inside. I go in next, firing the autogun to the right, one-handed, pulling myself through the hatch with my spare hand. Glass crunches under my feet, and I see that the Tau bodies are strewn all over the benches that run the length of each side of the transport. One or two more move, and we fire into them, and I hear the colonel jump up behind me, his auto pistol at the ready. The others burst from the front, and we stand there, looking at each other, and the 36 or so corpses lying between us. A few more start to come around, and we begin the grisly job of executing them all, pulling off their helmets and putting a round into every single head. Tanya joins us, but keeps her finger away from the trigger of her sniper rifle. Let's clear some space, I hear Oriole say, as he grabs a corpse by its legs and begins to drag it towards the door. I grab another under the arms and heft it up. A humming begins beneath my feet, and I feel the train start lifting off the ground again. Hurrying, we grab bodies and push them out of the doors, watching them tumble helplessly into the dust and sand as the train picks up speed. Won't somebody see them? Tanya asks. putting her hands under her armpits. We will be inside, and the alarm raised by the time that happens. We will be inside, and the alarm raised by the time that happens, Emperor Willing, Morik points out. How long till we get there? Asks Strelly, helping Tanya lift up the body. 10-15 minutes at most, judging by our acceleration and the time it'll take us to break a stop, Quidlin says, peering through one of the shattered windows. Forget the rest. Get ready, Oriole says, slamming a fresh clip into his pistol and cocking it. It reminds me of the first time I saw him. In the plasma chamber of Court Norum, 2 smoking auto pistols in his hands. He's assumed the same cockiness, the same confidence and air of control. There's no doubt at all that he knows what he's doing. That if any of us will get out of this alive, it's him. When we start to slow down, jump for it. Where's Coldwind? Strelly asks, a strange question at a time like this. His part in the mission is over. He's not going to be at the Battle Dome, Oriole replies from front, waving Strelly to get down. I stand at the top of the steps as he climbs down towards the speeding ground. I give him a thumbs up and he lets go, pushing himself off to one side with his legs, and I see him land and roll. A moment later, and he's on his feet. He stands there and waves. As we carry on, I watch him, still standing there, making no effort that I can see to get to the shuttle. The next few minutes pass in silence as we watch the battle dome rise further and further out of the sand as we get closer. It's big, bigger than I had imagined. I reckon it must be at least 3, maybe 4 kilometers across at the base, dwarfing anything we saw back near the spaceport. Even the battle dome on Melik was only half the size, though. I guess they had a lot more of them there. I feel the locomotive decelerating quickly now. The dome's just a few hundred meters away, and I get ready, crouching down by one of the broken windows, the autogun warm in my hands. All thoughts of Malik put to the back of my mind. Tross jumps for 100 meters shy of the black hole that swallows up the trail and heads off to the right, pulling charges from his pack. I check the autogun one last time and rest it on the sill of the window. Last chance, Quidlin says to me, a worried expression on his face. I've been thinking. We're about to take on a whole army. Just a handful of us, I mean. How are we supposed to beat a whole army? Inquisitor, I call out from the front of the coach. How many are we going to be facing? Coldwind says it's just brightsword's own hunter cadre, and one other cadre left here, he tells me, looking back down the carriage at us. About 100, maybe 120 warriors. Small change, brains, I say to Quidlin, grinning. Court Norum, now that was a real army we took down. Thousands of them. How did you do it? He asks, subdued for a change. Short answer or long one, I say to him, peering out the window. The opening to the side of the dome gets closer and closer. The white dome itself gleams in the strong light, dazzling against the pure blue sky. I think we've only got time for the short answer, last chance, Tanya says from the opposite side of the aisle. Take them on in small lumps, I laugh, feeling very calm. The throbbing in my head begins to subside as I settle down. It's like everything from the last few months focusing in on me. An out-of-body feeling that I've had before, the rapture I told Tanya about earlier, the feeling that something else is inside my body. Everything goes dim for a second, and we pass inside the dome. But I realize it isn't really dark. The yellow lighting is simply nowhere near as bright as the harsh glare outside. In a moment, we're through the gateway and entering the terminal. Long boarding platforms run the length of the track on each side, with wide archways at regular intervals. There are a few Tau Fire warriors stationed there, and I can imagine their surprise as the train glides gently to a halt, its windows smashed. We don't give them a chance to react. I rise up slightly, still with the autogun on the window frame, and open fire, with a short burst, gunning down the nearest Tau. The bullets kicking across his stomach and chest, ripping chunks out of his armored breastplate. The colonel aims low at another, the row of bullet impacts from his pistol stitching a line across the wall before kneecapping the warrior. Oriel is jumping through the door, firing as he leaps, scoring a cluster of perfect hits on the helmet of a third fire warrior. I propel myself out of the back door and roll left to the opposite of the now stationary carriage, using its back end for cover. A fire warrior turns to run through one of the archways, but I get a bead on him first, the shots taking him high in the back and pitching him forward. He rolls and clambers to his feet, still alive and kicking, and returns fire with his bulky carbine, chewing a massive chunk out of the side of the rat train and forcing me to duck back. Glancing out, I see Quidlin fire from inside, his fusillade of las bolts slamming into the fire warrior and spinning him down again. Just then, a dull boom sounds from our right. Tross charges going up. A piercing wail fills the air as warning sirens screech into life. Make for the power complex, the colonel bellows, following Oriel and Morik out of the other side of the station in search of brightsword. They have to flush the commander out in the open so that Tanya can get her shot. I silently wish them the protection of the Emperor. Quidlin and Tanya join me in the nearest archway. It all springs back to life, the hours and days and weeks spent on the laurels of glory. It's just how the training bay was set up. We go through this arch, take the next doorway to the left, 3 doors to the right, down the corridor, and across a jungle arena. On the other side are 2 more doors, and we're into the central plaza, the power facility, and armory entrance. Everyone knows the drill, I say to the other 2. Come on, last chancers, time to die. With that, I toss a grenade through the arch and follow through. A couple seconds later, shots detonate around me, too close for comfort, and I hit the ground, returning fire down the corridor. Tanya sprints across the tunnel and takes cover in the next door alcove, Quidlin following her, snapping off shots from the hip as he does so. I push myself to my feet, rattle off another burst of fire, and follow through them. The magazine's empty, so I pluck it and discard it, slamming another one home with well-practiced ease. Another corridor and another smoke grenade, Quidlin firing back through the arch we just passed through, and I hear a shout of someone hit. As we get to a closed portal, I signal Quidlin to get it open. He searches around for an access panel and finds it just above the floor inside the archway. Come on, Brains, we haven't got all day, I hiss at him, before firing at a glimpse of movement to my right. I glance back and see he has a panel open, an odd-looking instrument in his hands, like a pair of compasses made from crystal and wires. There's a hiss and the door opens. Tanya ducks through first and comes scurrying back a second later as explosions rock the room beyond. Grenades! I tell them, and Quidlin tosses one through the doorway, followed a moment later by one from my belt. The twin detonations scatter shrapnel across a wide area, the smell of explosives hanging in the air. Another, much louder explosion rocks the walls, and I see debris pile up further down the tunnel. Trost comes bursting through the hole, firing blindly behind him with his lasgun. I grab Tanya and force her forward, pushing her ahead of me until we reach the next alcove. The smoke, dust, and yellow lighting makes everything look foggy and polluted, and it threatens to clog my mouth and nose. Tanya pulls out the las cutter and gets to work on the next door as we provide covering fire. 3 more fire warriors go down further along the narrow corridor, and many more duck back out of sight. I can hear the hiss of the las burner melting through the door, and a moment later Tanya calls out that she's through. Crawling back through the opening, I find myself in the middle of a jungle, like I expected. The humidity and heat makes me jump out of my skin straight away, and it takes a while for my eyes to adjust to the relative darkness. Trost is bringing up a grenade and tripwire next to the opening as we take positions against the trunks of the trees, up to our waists, in large fern leaves. Drones! Snaps Tanya, leveling her sniper rifle to the left. I look away, and a half a dozen of the things come flitting down through the leaves. They're domed discs, about a meter across, with thick aerials protruding from their curved tops, each underslung with a pair of linked guns that track and swivel as they scan the jungle for us. Tanya opens fire, plucking the closest out of the air with a single shot, its fractured casing spinning to the ground and trailing sparks. Quidlin and I shoot next. A converging salvo of las bolts and bullets that send three more of the drones out of control, smashing into trees and plunging into the bushes. The two that are left return fire, and we duck from cover as the shells smash fist-sized chunks from the trees, hurling bark everywhere and shattering sweet-smelling sap. I roll backways through the ferns, flattening leaves, and finish on my back, firing up. The shots ricochet off one of the drones, causing it to judder in its flight, but it recovers and dips down out of sight. Smart little beggar. A swathe of falling ferns is the only warning I get of the drone's shots, and I roll to my feet and dive sideways, landing awkwardly behind a fallen log. The shells strip through the leaves at knee height, splintering along the log. The drone must be hovering just above the ground. One of them hits a more rotten patch of wood and passes straight through, scoring a bloody cut across the back of my right leg, just below the knee, but missing the bone. I bite back the pain and fire back blindly, resting the autogun on the log and squeezing off the remainder of the magazine. Banging more ammo home, I glance over the top of the fallen trunk and see the drone gliding towards me, its guns tracking left and right, smoking gently. When it's just a couple of meters away, I burst out of cover and leap at the thing, diving right on top of it. It sways sideways, trying to escape, and I drop the autogun and grab its circular rim with both hands. My muscles strain against the anti-gravity motors as I turn it vertical, its gun spinning wildly, trying to point at me, but instead just finding thin air. With a shout, I break into a headlong run at the nearest tree, pushing the drone into front of me and smashing it against the trunk, gouging a strip from the bark and causing one of the guns to snap off its mounting. I smash it against the tree 4 more times until the motors die, and it suddenly becomes heavy in my hands. I drop the drone to the ground, where it wobbles uncertainly for a few seconds before falling still. I go back and pick up my autogun and shout for the others. Tanya appears first, her right cheek bloodied, splinters of wood embedded in her face. "You need closer and I would have lost my eye," she tells me, sitting down against the tree and dabbing at the blood with her cuff. Quidlin and Trost appear together, apparently unarmed. "I think it's this way, but I got turned around in the fight, and it all looks the same, so maybe it isn't?" Quidlin says, pointing up to a trail to our left. Check your direction finder. No, check your direction finder, idiot, I tell Quidlin, and he pulls the magneto compass from his belt, turning its dials to align properly. He gives us a shake and adjusts it again. "It's no use," he says, shaking his head. "I think the Tau have got some kind of interference generator, or perhaps just the structure of the dome is jamming the scanning beams." "If you hadn't stabbed eyes, we would know for sure," snarls Trost, inspecting the shot counter on his lasgun. "Forget about the past. It's better to be moving than sitting targets for more drones or worse." I snap at the pair of them, slapping the compass from Quidlin's grasp. "According to the next setup on the Laurels of Glory, there should be only one other exit out of this area. We find that, we know where we are." "Oh, and the Tau will just let us? Will they, last chance?" Trost spits, pulling Tanya to her feet. "No, but we can make them think twice about stopping us," I tell them. "Come on, less arguing, more moving." Progress through the jungle is slow, hampered by the undergrowth and the need to keep alert at all times. The area is only a few hundred meters across, but we take our time, not wanting to run into the Tau without expecting it. After about 10 minutes, Trost hisses and hits the deck, the rest of us following suit. "Movement, maybe 30 meters to the left," he whispers. I rise to a crouch and see that he's right. I make out fire warriors advancing cautiously between the trees. I'm not sure how many, maybe half a dozen, perhaps more. I point upwards, and they all nod, understanding the plan. Keeping the trunks between us and the Tau, we shin up into the lower branches and wait for the enemy to pass beneath us. The first few walk by without noticing, but a drone buzzes past just below me and then stops. Now! I shout, dropping down, my gun blazing in my hand. At this range, I can't miss, and the drone explodes into a shower of flaming shrapnel. The Tau turn, but I'm on them, swinging the butt of the autogun into the helmeted face of the closest, smashing the small cluster of lenses that were where his eyes should be. The next in line raises his rifle to blast me apart, but I kick the muzzle aside, and the shot tears through his comrade, nearly slicing him in half. I reverse the kick and power my boot into the Tau's chest, smashing him into his back, and then leap on him, diving the autogun under his chin and pulling the trigger. The top of the helmet explodes across the ferns in a bloody spray. I look up to see Quidlin, driving his knife up to the groin of another fire warrior, while Tross smashes a rock over the head of another. The two remaining aliens turn and flee, but Quidlin snatches up his lasgun and cuts them down in an intense salvo of bullets before they get out of sight. I take a pause to catch my breath, looking at the mutilated bodies. Rather them than me. We head off in the direction the Tau came from, figuring they must have entered through a doorway we're looking for. Another 100 meters or so, and there's a stream across our path, cutting through a wide clearing. It looks like a killing zone to me. Good lines of fire from all around the perimeter. The stream to splash around, slip around in. We're up against the clock here, so no time to look for a better spot, up or downstream. The drone attack has us behind schedule anyways. We need to get out of here fast and into the central chamber. Moving across the clearing catches my eye, and I instinctively bring up the autogun, ready to fire. I look harder, but all I can see are leaves and branches. Then to my right, there's more movement, and I focus on the area quickly, but there's nothing to be seen. I peer out through the foliage, keeping my head down, trying to see what's moving out there. I catch a glimpse now, and then of something, but nothing I could definitely identify as Tau. It's then that my attention is drawn to the large bole of a tree pretty much directly opposite from where I'm crouched. I look at the deep score lines, the bark running up and down, and they bend and twist slightly. The strange thing is, the pattern of lines is almost a perfect humanoid shape. Sneaky bastards, I whisper to myself, lining up a shot in which I take to be the head of the near invisible warrior. I pull the trigger softly, sending a single round cracking out against the clearing. It impacts on something in front of the tree, and it's there that I see a figure thrashing the ground, the light somehow bending around it, making it impossible to see. Then all hell breaks loose. There's muzzle flashes from all around us, just within the far tree line. There's incoming fire from every direction, a massive fusillade of bullets that converge on our position, shredding leaves and branches and punching into the thick trunks of the trees, spraying iron-hard splinters around us, forcing us to hurriedly duck further back into the cover. How do we get past? Asks Trost, leaning back against the tree, glancing down over his shoulder. I can't even see them. One of us draws their fire, the others shoot on the muzzle flashes, I say. Great! Who gets the job of target? Trost says, obviously not volunteering for himself. I'll do it, Tanya says, but before I can stop her, she's headed out towards the clearing. Trost and me follow quickly after her, scanning the trees for signs of movement. Tanya breaks from cover for a couple of seconds, and then dashes out of sight again. But not before the Tau opened fire. I see a blaze of light just to my left, and fire quickly, emptying half a clip, before turning my arm on more movements to my right, using the rest of the magazine. I pull it out, and slam in another one. 3 reloads to go, and there's still plenty of fighting to be done. Rush him! I shout, ducking my head back down and dashing out, firing wildly from the hip, before diving down into the cover offered by the shallow lip of the stream. There's more return fire, which kicks up a dozen of impact slashes in the water around me, and I quickly wriggle my legs out of the way and fire back, targeting a cluster of bushes where I saw 3 or 4 flashes of light. There's a crackle of sparks, and something crashes out of the bushes, flattening the leaves underneath it. I hear fire from my right and see Trost targeting the same spot, and open fire again, guessing there's more where that one came from. Something buzzes past my head and carves a furrow in the bank behind me before exploding, showering me in dirt. Demolition Man, show me some fireworks, I shouted to Trost, who's now just upstream from me. He gives me a thumbs up and pulls a large canister from his pack, about the size of my forearm. Pulling the pin, he hefts it towards the far tree line, and I watch it spin through the air. Don't look, Trost shouts, but too late. I'm just twisting my head away when the bomb explodes, and a sheet of white fire erupts in a cycle, searing my vision and causing spots to dance in front of my eyes. I feel someone grab me by the shoulder and haul me to my feet. Follow me! I hear Tanya pant in my ear, and I stumble into a run as she guides me across the clearing. All I can smell is burning, and I can feel the charred earth crunching under my step. Blinking my eyes rapidly, my vision starts to return. First, a blur of yellow and green, but after a couple more seconds, hazy shapes of bushes and a gray blob I take to be Quidlin or Trost. Door's not too far, I hear Quidlin say, rubbing at my eyes. I can see him much more clearly. You got any more of those incendiaries, Demolition Man? Tanya asks. Just one more, he replies. Better save it, I tell him. Use ordinary grenades. We charge the exit, which isn't that well held, the tin tower taken down with 3 simultaneous explosions. I thought it would be harder getting out, Tanya admits, as we pound down the corridor towards the entrance to the power chamber. A lot of them came after me, Trost tells us. I caused a hell of a bang. Nearly took down half the dome, I reckon. And there's the colonel causing mayhem as well, I remind them, as Tanya goes to work with the las cutter again. We have to keep the advantage of surprise. I don't know how quick they can respond, but something tells me the tower good at getting organized very quickly. I'm through, Tanya informs us, snapping closed the cutter and banging it on one of her pack straps. Remember the plan, I say, readying a smoke grenade. Cover the ground to the tower and get inside. Demolition Man and me hold off any attackers while Brains cuts the power and locks down the doors. Sharpshooter, get to the top of the tower, ready to fire. Any trouble, just shout and I'll come running. Got it, last chance, Tanya says with a nod, pulling one of her own smoke grenades. See you at the top of the tower. We roll the grenades through the opening cut by Tanya, and I glance after them to see thick blue smoke spilling everywhere. Go! I slap Tanya on the backside as she jumps through the hole, followed by Quidlin. I hear a burst of gunfire and follow through quickly, Tross bringing up the rear. I hurl myself through the smoke, not bothering to try to fire, as shots whine and whistle around us, and nearly slam face first into the wall of the tower. Something explodes above my head and showers me with debris from the tower wall. Get inside right now, I bark at the others. As they head off in the direction of the door, I see shadowy shapes to the left and right, and a sight along the barrel of the autogun, picking my shots. I loose off one burst to the left and see a figure drop, then another to the right. I take a few steps along the wall to change my position, and return fire begins to send splinters up from the floor and wall where I was standing. I fire back at the muzzle flares, and hear a muffled scream as my shots hit home. A few more steps, and I can see Tross in the doorway, waving frantically at me. What's the matter? I ask, hurling over to him. Quidlin's gone AWOL, disappeared to the far side of the tower, he tells me, pointing over his shoulder with his thumb. Okay, hold positions here. I'll drag that stupid fragger back, I tell the saboteur. The inside of the tower is wide open, a single spiral staircase winding up to the other floors around a central pole. Small landings at regular intervals going up towards the ceiling. I glance up and see Tanya still running up the stairs, her rifle over her back as she steadies herself along the central column, but with no handrails to guide her. Pulling myself to the task at hand, I look across the circular hallway to the door opposite, where the door is still open. I dart a look outside. There's still no Tau inside, but there's a line of 5 empty battlesuits standing on the concourse. In front of me is a pair of heavy armored doors, and I see Quidlin over by them. The suits stand open, the front of the bodies hinged up, the thigh-high panels lowered, showing the cockpit inside. Glancing around again, I sprint over to the open. Hey, Brains, what the frag are you doing? I shout at him. Magnificent, aren't they? He says, grinning like a fool. Think, if we had one of these, there'd be no stopping us. We cut through the fire warriors with no problem. If we don't get a fragging move on now, then a bunch of Tau bastards in these suits are going to come for us. And we're not going to stand a chance, I bark at him, spinning around on the shoulder. Now, shut the damn power off before more reinforcements arrive along the grav rail. I'll just take a quick look in one of them, he says, pulling himself away and stepping towards the nearest battlesuit. We have not got time for this crap, I yell at him, grabbing him by his arm. He twists suddenly and drives his fist into my gut, knocking me to my knees. Back off, last chance, he snaps. I might die here, but I want to have a look at one of these machines before I go. He climbs into the battlesuit, but I jump after him, dragging him back down to the ground. He rolls easily out of my grasp and swings a kick at my groin, which I barely deflect with my thigh. I guess I taught him well. His fist hammers into my right eye faster than anything he ever threw at me in training. I fall back on my ass, dazed, and he climbs back up again. With the fronts of the thighs lowered down for access, I can see that there's a seat inside, surrounded by display panels and rows of illuminated buttons. Hooking his leg inside, Quidlin drops into the seat, and I notice how his legs drop into the thighs of the suit. Bracing clamps close with a hiss around his legs, locking him in place. As I push myself to my feet, clutching my gut, he stabs at one of the controls. There's a high-pitched tone, and a Tau voice says something. Get out of there! You don't know what you're doing! I yell at him. Back off, last chance, he shouts at me, a wild, possessed look in his eye. His left hand settles on a stubby control column, while his right punches a few more buttons. I think I've got it. The controls are actually really simple, all in the right places. The eye panels flip back into place, sealing shut with a clang. And then, with a whirring of motors, the main canopy drops down. The last I see of Quidlin is his wide grin. The suit sits there motionless for a moment, and I wonder if he really has worked it all out. Then the war machine begins to judder, shaking violently for a couple of seconds. With a hiss, the chest plate opens again. The canopy hinges away to reveal a charred corpse in the seat, still smoking, burnt lips peeling back from grinning teeth. There's a few crackles of energy still playing around two rods inserted on either side of Quidlin's head. Silently, the rods withdraw back to the sides of the cockpit. The thighs peel downward, revealing his ravaged legs, pieces of material burnt into the bone. The stench of flesh still fills my nostrils, and I gag. I gulp heavily to stop myself from throwing up. You stupid piece of sump filth, I bellow at Quidlin's husk of a body, losing my sense completely. I fire a few shots into the corpse, causing it to collapse in a pile of bodies and ashes which spill out from the suit. I spit on the pile and then kick it back, scattering ashes and chunks of scattered bone around me. Stupid fragging, stupid son of a bitch, stupid fragger, I scream hoarsely, punctuating my shouting with kicks before pulling myself together. I stand there, panting, and look at the slightly smoking battlesuit. I pull a grenade from my belt and toss it into the seat before stepping back. The explosion tears the cockpit apart, throwing out shattered glass and pieces of instrument panel that drop amongst Quidlin's burnt remains. Realizing I haven't gotten too many grenades, I use my autogun on the other four, spraying short bursts of bullets into each one. My firing rewarded by sparks of electricity and small fires breaking out across various control panels. More gunfire draws my attention to the tower, and I turn on my heel and leg it. Glancing to my left, I see fire warriors coming into the surrounding chamber and fire off a few bursts of shots, taking one of them down and forcing the others back out of sight. I watch the tower, and Tross is there, firing from the other doorway. I look over his shoulder and see three more downed fire warriors sprawling halfway across the concourse. Keep tight. I'll check on sharpshooter, I tell him, before pounding up the steps two at a time, paying no heed to the fact that I could fall off and plummet to the ground with a misstep. It takes me some hard running to get up to the top, passing rooms full of instruments and glowing control panels, but eventually I burst into an open platform. Tanya is, cr- Tanya is crouched behind the parapet, her sniper rifle clasped across her chest, shots ringing off the surrounding wall. I duck and roll over to her. How's things? I ask, pulling the autogun magazine to check how many bullets are left. It's about half full. They know I'm up here. I can't prepare for a clean shot under this kind of fire, she tells me with a grimace. Some hidden hunter you are, I snap, worming my way up forward as more shells chip off the edge of the parapet. They came in and started firing. They already know I was here. They didn't see me. She snaps back, giving me a sour look. We're going to get surrounded pretty soon if we aren't careful, I say, pushing the magazine into the autogun. I pop out of the cover of the parapet and fire off 3 shots at a group of fire warriors crouched in one of the archways around the central chamber, causing them to duck back. Dropping back out of sight, I crawl across the platform into the opposite edge and peek a look over the top. Another 7 warriors are closing in on our position from the other side. Again, I jump up, fire 2 quick bursts, catching one, the tower full on, before ducking down again. Suddenly, I hear someone bellowing in Tao, a much deeper voice than I've ever heard. I scramble over to Tanya, and she nods. We look down, and we see a tall alien running amongst a group of fire warriors, wearing flowing red robes. That's brightsword! I hiss at her, and she nods again, bringing her sniper rifle into position. It's then that I hear another shout, this time in Gothic. He's heading for the armory! Stop him! I hear Oriel bellow, and see the Inquisitor and the Colonel dashing to view from another archway, auto pistols spitting bullets, bloodied chainswords in their hands. Morok follows them, firing shots at the fire warriors dashing across the chamber, taking a couple of them down. I join their fire for a couple of seconds, but can't get a clear shot on Brightsword. Another fire warrior squad intercepts Oriel and the others, cutting off their line of fire to the Tau commander. Come on, sharpshooter, take him down! I snarl at Tanya, but she doesn't answer. As return fire makes me dive for cover again, I glance back at her. She's there, crouched over her rifle, taking aim. But she does nothing, just slowly tracks aim. Get a clear shot, Emperor, damn you! I snarl, but she ignores me, and then her hands begin to tremble. I see the muzzle of the rifle wobbling in her grip. Take it easy, breathe, and plug the bastard, I say. Trying to keep myself calm, I crouch there staring at her, willing her to pull the trigger. Now! I try to mentally shout at her, now, damn it! With a choked sob, she drops the rifle, clattering to the platform, and falls to the ground. Are you hit? I yell at her, jumping over to her side. She balls herself up, arms over her head to protect herself, and I can hear her sobbing over the rattle of gunfire and the snap of lasgun. Tanya, are you hurt? I demand, grabbing her shoulder. She's limp, and I pull her arm away and see tears streaking down her face. I couldn't do it, she sobs at me. I'm sorry, Cage. Brag, it's stupid! I lose the power of speech. I'm so incensed. I backhand her across the face. We are so dead now. You wouldn't believe it. I'm sorry, she apologizes again, in between sobs and sniffs. It's too fragging late for that now. I yell at her, dragging her up by the hair. Get your rifle. We have to get out of this tower. She stands there dumbly for a second, staring blankly at me. Get your damn rifle, soldier, and move out. I scream at her face. She seems to snap out of it, losing the glazed look in her eyes, and snatches up her rifle. She darts another look at me, and then heads back towards the stairs. I take one last glance over the tower edge, just in time to see Brightsword and his bodyguards disappearing from view through the wide doorway just behind the damaged battlesuits. I run after Tanya, changing the clip of the autogun, making an effort to slow myself as I dash down the treacherous spiral staircase. Tumbling down and breaking my neck would be such a stupid way to go. After all, I'm sure the tower are going to try pretty hard to kill me. I don't want to spoil their fun. When I reach the bottom, Tross turns around to me. What's happening? What's happening? He asks, switching his attention back and forth between me and the fire warriors outside. Brightsword's escaped. We have to get out of here, I say, heading to the other door. I see Oriole, Morik, and the Colonel fighting hand to hand with a squad of fire warriors. I'll say this: the Tau have impressive guns, but they don't know the first thing about close combat. Schaefer and the Inquisitor easily cut down each of them to bits with their chainswords and head our way. More fire warriors appear behind them, and I give them some covering fire, squeezing off a few rounds at a time, knowing I've only got one magazine left. Morik stops and turns, firing a few shots at the Tau as well, driving them back into hiding again. Oriole's the first to reach the tower. Which way did he go? The Inquisitor demands, grabbing the collar of my camo shirt. I point at the doors, which have closed again now. He has got inside the armory, the Colonel says heavily, chest heaving from his recent exertions. That will make things more difficult. He and the Inquisitor push past me, and Morik jogs over, ejecting his lasgun's power pack. Sharpshooter failed us. Yep, she did, I agree. Time for us to get the frag out. The mission is not yet complete, last chance, he says, sliding another power pack into place. In case you hadn't noticed, the mission has gone up like a demo charge. It's a fragging major catastrophe. I snarl at him, trying to push past, but he grabs my arm. I wrench it free from his grasp. It's over. We messed up. Now it's time to cut and run. Are you deserting, Lieutenant Cage? He asks ominously, the barrel of the lasgun swinging in my direction. Yes, I sodden well am deserting. You are not a commissar anymore, Morik, I point out to him. You do not have to die here. No, I am not a commissar, he replies viciously. I am Hero. Do you remember that? Hero, which is why I do not cut and run, and I do not desert in the middle of the mission, and that is why you are not going to take another step. This is idiotic, I snap back at him. Aren't there enough Tau to fight us without gunning down each other? Today is a lost battle, but perhaps we've scared brightsword enough. We'll win the war. Let's get on that shuttle and live to fight another day. Hell, I'm volunteering right now to join the defense of Sarcassa, but I'm not staying here a second longer. Hold your position, Lieutenant, I hear Schaefer bark from inside. He steps to the doorway and signals Morik to get out of the way. Shoot me, cut me down, I don't really care anymore, I shout at the Colonel. I am getting out of here, but I'm not going to come back for you this time. The Colonel smiles, then, a grim expression. Too late, he replies simply, pointing over my shoulder. I look around. The armory doors are sliding effortlessly open, and I realize why Oriole is so confident the brightsword would pass by Tanya's sniping position. They do a lot of combat. It's not so bad. Reminds me of that cripple fight comic somebody made between a zoanthrope and a drone, because they both have some amount of like offensive capability, but it's kind of funny to see them locked in close combat. I feel the ground tremble under my feet as the five battle suits advance, striding between the smoking wrecks of the ones in front of the doors. They pound straight towards us with their guns brought up. Bright swords is easy to pick out, more decorated than the others. An intricate Tau design on the front plate. A multi barreled cannon on his right arm swings in our direction. A missile pod mounted on his shoulder, angling up towards the tower. On his left arm is a shield like device, which I can see is crackling with energy. His body, his bodyguard are armed with the same multi barreled guns and a mix of other lethal looking weaponry. I feel my legs buckle underneath me, and I drop to my knees. Everything seems to slow down. I see four barrels of Brightsword's gun begin to spin, building up speed, and then he opens fire with an explosive burst of light, the shells tearing into the wall just behind me. I hear Schaefer curse and dive back into the tower. As somebody calls my name, Morik, I think. Everything snaps back into my head. The roar of the guns is deafening, and I drive to one side and roll, feeling the whip of bullets screaming around me. Something hot and painful catches my foot, sending me sprawling again, and I look down to see blood oozing out of a hole in my right boot. Biting back a shout of pain, I bring out my autogun and open fire, spraying bullets at Brightsword. They ricochet harmlessly off his battlesuit in a random patter of sparks, leaving tiny little dents, but having no other effect. One of the bodyguards peels off towards me and points what is unmistakably a flamer in my direction. I hurl myself to my feet, ignoring the searing pain from my foot, and dive into cover behind the tower, a moment before a jet of flame crackles past, spilling burning fuel across the concourse. The heat washes over my stinging eyes. To my right, I see others sprinting from the tower. A couple of seconds later, an explosion wrecks the tower from the inside. Flames billowing out of the doorways. I try to stand, but my leg gives way, slumping me against the wall of the tower. The Tau battle suits with the flamer stomps towards the corner, weapons tracking from side to side, seeking a target. It aims at the fleeing last chancers, not noticing me, and I open fire with the last few bullets left in my magazine, aiming for the canister of flamer fuel on his right arm. The canister explodes, setting fire to the left side of the armored suit and hurling molten shrapnel across the floor. The suit's pilot ignores the damage, turning on me with the cannon. I take the only route open and dive between the battlesuit's legs, just as the gun opens fire. The battlesuit swings laboriously around to face me, forcing me to dodge and side again. I break for the cover of the smoldering tower and jump inside just as Brightsword turns and fires, the bullets tearing up great chunks of the floor behind me. Inside, the tower is littered with rubble from the destroyed steps, dirty great cracks in its walls. My foot has gone numb, and I sprint lopsidedly out of the other door, limping heavily. The others are sheltering in one of the door alcoves on the side of the concourse, shooting ineffectively at the battlesuits as they split up and round the tower from each direction. My foot slips on debris as I run out of the exit, twisting my tortured foot and sending me headfirst into the floor with a cry of pain. I look up and see the gray and black armor of Brightsword looming over me, one foot raised to stamp on me. I roll sideways under the foot, which smashes down just centimeters from my leg, crackling the solid material on the concourse. As I drag myself to my feet, Brightsword swings quickly, pivoting on one foot, the barrel of his chainsword smashing to my chest and hurling me against the tower wall. I feel something break inside me, a couple of ribs probably, and my breathing becomes tight and short. The Tau commander brings his arm back for another punch, and I drop to one side, the blow smashing chips from the wall and showering me with dust. The others direct their fire on Brightsword as he looms over me, las bolts and bullets pinging around us. I get the strangest sensation that I've been here before. Then I realize that this is like the waking nightmare I had on the shuttle. In fact, it's almost exactly the same. The gunfire around me, the massive figure looming over me. He turns, raising his shield arm, and the shots ricochet off it wildly, causing small crackles of energy to leap from the disc. His shield is still locked into place, and he swings at me again, nearly taking my head off. Strangely, I don't feel so scared about that now. It's like I know something. It's like I know he's not going to kill me. Then I hear a sharper crack over the zip of las guns and the rattle of autoguns. Something slams into the shield, causing it to detonate in a bright shower of blue sparks, falling to the ground, and 3 shattered pieces. More shots ring out, armor-piercing shells punching neatly through the battlesuit in a tight cluster at the center of the main chest piece. The Tau commander forgets me and turns to the others, swinging the burst cannon around to a firing position. The next incoming shot hits one of the barrels head on, causing it to split. And as he fires, the gun ruptures, shearing off the whole arm, which spins past and clings to the ground just to my right. More shots in rapid succession cut through the suits. There's a hiss from the battlesuit, and a moment later, a section of the body is punched away on 4 small jets, hurling brightsword from the crippled machine. The 4 bodyguards are leaping towards the last chancers, who are heading for the far end of the chamber, propelling their battlesuits forwards on long leaps on their jump jets. I look back at the escape pod and see the hatch swing open. The others are caught off, the bodyguard in between them, and brightsword. I'm coming for you, you alien meathead! I snarl, propelling myself across the concourse. The other battlesuits oblivious to my presence, leaving blood-red footprints behind me. I reach the escape pod as Brightsword pulls himself clear, bleeding profusely from a wound on his arm. He slumps to the ground and looks up at me, anger in his eyes. He mutters something in Tau, but takes a deep breath. I heft the autogun in both hands, and he makes no attempt to block me as I swing the butt to his head, cracking his skull and causing him to scream out in pain. I hear a screech of metal on metal and look around to see the battlesuited bodyguard turning quickly in my direction. Wasting no time, I dash Brightsword's brains across the floor with another 2 blows, and then start hobbling back towards the tower. Run! Bellows Oriole, sprinting away. One of the battlesuits pivots into his direction and fires. A ball of white-hot plasma, screaming just past the Inquisitor to explode in a blinding flash on the distant dome wall. I can't! I snarl at him through gritted teeth as he reaches my position. The bodyguards have split up, 2 of them pursuing the other last chancers, the other pair, including the one-armed suit I'd tangled with earlier, heading back towards to exact some vengeance for their dead commander. We have to rendezvous with the others, back at the transport terminal, Oriole tells me, putting one shoulder under my arm and lifting me to my feet. He drags me through the tower, just as a plume of explosions outside heralds a rocket attack, the shockwave, hurling both of us into the rubble. Can you walk? He asks me, standing unsteadily on the shifting debris. I'll bloody walk out of here if I need to, I tell him, with feeling, grabbing his arm and pulling myself up. Damn! More fire warriors, Oriole curses, glancing out of the opposite door. There's too much open ground to get across. Make a dash for it. Leave me here, I say to him, but he just laughs. Leave the heroics for Morik. Sod the heroics. I'm hoping you'll draw them off, I snap back, not all amused. Can you use some magic on them or something? And do what? He snarls, exasperated. Persuade them to go away? I don't think that will work. Well, I don't know, I shout back, getting angry. It's your fragging power, not mine. Make them think we're dead or something. They'll go after the others, and then we can make a break for it. A shadow looms over the doorway, and we scuttle out of view as one of the Tau thrusts through his burst cannon and lets rip, shredding the opposite wall and filling the air with dust and flying shards. All right, I'll try, Oriole agrees. Lie down and play dead. At least, if this doesn't work, we won't know about it. We sprawl ourselves in the rubble and wait. I try to make my breathing as shallow as possible. I feel the blood congealing in my boot, the dust settling in my mouth, making me want to cough. I close my eyes so that I don't blink. Tau voices drift through the doorway behind us, and I focus my attention on the sharp rubble under me, trying to act like I'm as dead as a stone. I can hear feet crunching, Quite a few aliens, by my judgment, inside now, and something prods at my back, the barrel of a rifle. There's more talking. I hear the clump clump of the heavy battle suits receding outside, followed by a burst of gunfire. The tower around us move out hurriedly, leaving us in peace. I lie there for a while longer. Sit tight and wait for them to leave the chamber, I hear Oriole say, and then realize he's inside my head again rather than actually speaking. I count slowly to myself, picturing the tower running across the concourse after the others. When I've given them a couple of minutes to be well clear, I sit up and see Oriole already by one of the doors, peering out. They left a couple of guards at the far end, he tells me, gesturing for me to look. I glance out and see two war drones hovering 100 meters or so away. Guess you can't trick them. Have to do it the traditional way, I say, retrieving my autogun from where I discarded it on the floor. Take the one on the right, I'll take the one on the left, Oriole says, moving over to the other doorway. On my count. I line up the shot, using the pitted and cracked edge of the floor to help steady my aim. The drone is sat there, slowly rotating, using its artificial eyes and ears to keep watch on the tower and doorways on either side of the chamber. 1, 2, Oriole counts down and then stops. Someone's coming, he hisses to me, ducking back inside. Who? I whisper back, moving around to get a clear shot of the doorway. A Tau, no armor, he tells me. Perhaps come for Ovar. I look out and see the Tau picking his way cautiously towards the tower, glancing around every couple of seconds. He's dressed in layers of light green and blue robes, which waft around him as quickly as he walks our way. It's Coldwind, I say, relaxing as he gets closer. I gesture to his attention, and he spots me, startled. He quickens his pace and hurries over. The Shaws think you are dead, he says, gazing at us in astonishment. That's what I wanted them to think, Oriole confirms, not giving any details. What are you doing here? The others are in a safe place for the moment, but I wanted to check up on the reports that you had not been killed, he tells us, regaining his composure. It is rare for our warriors to make such a mistake. Can you take us to the others? I ask, glancing at the drones outside. Yes, follow me after I've dismissed the battle drones, he replies immediately. I watch him walk out again and say something to the drones and Tau. They bob in acknowledgement and then turn and zip to one of the doorways to our left, moving at some speed. He waves us to come out of hiding. Where are the others? Oriole asks, helping me limp across the concourse. And just what the hell are you doing here? Close by in one of the urban training areas, the colonel tells us, pointing us the right way. They have doubled back and are now behind the fire sweep the Shas has currently been performing. I will lead you to them, and then you should be able to reach your shuttle without a serious encounter. I am here because I thought it should be prudent if something would go amiss. It seems a wise decision. Oriole stares at Coldwind, his eyes narrowed. You're still holding something back, the Inquisitor snarls, stopping in his tracks. Tell me. The ambassador hesitates for a moment, and then sighs. Your shuttle has been detected. An intercept craft have been dispatched from orbit to prevent your escape, he tells us, urging us to keep moving with a wave of his hand. I cannot guarantee you will reach your ship safely. Is that all? I ask. I never expected to get an easy ride out of here anyways. We follow the ambassador out into a corridor, which curves gently away to the left. We pass several open doors. One or two contain the corpses of fire warriors. The walls are scarred with signs of battle, cracked and pitted from bullets, last shots, and plasma impacts. In here, Coldwind tells us as we reach a wide double doorway. They are on the two-story building, just beyond this doorway. He opens the door for us, and we step inside a small imperial town, swathed in darkness. 2 and 3-story buildings loom up in a fake night sky around us, illuminated by two dully glowing moons. I load my last magazine into my autogun as we cross the deserted street, listening for any sign of the others. We stop and hear whispered voices from a building dead ahead. Yes, in there, Coldwind tells us, pointing for us to precede him. We scuttle through the shadows, and Oriole calls out, Last chancers? He hisses. Inquisitor, I hear the colonel reply. The door opens on creaking hinges, and we step inside. I look back and see that Coldwind has disappeared. At that moment, blazing light like a sun breaks out everywhere, bathing the building in a white glare. Squinting out of one of the windows, I can see the 4 battlesuits standing in the square at the front of the building, searchlights springing from concealed lenses within their suits. I can also see other figures scurrying around the buildings, fire warriors hugging the plentiful cover. It's brightsword's Chassavis. Coldwind has betrayed us, snaps Oriole, ripping his pistol from its holster. He delves into a pocket in his coat and pulls out what looks like a small globe. He whispers to it for a couple of seconds before pulling it away. I turn my attention back to the battlesuits. With deliberate slowness, like a firing squad taking aim, the Chasseurs angle their shoulder-mounted rocket launchers at the building we're in. First rule of assassination. We should have realized, I heard the colonel say. What's that? Tanya says, loading a large caliber bullet from her bandolier into the sniper rifle in her hands. Kill all the assassins, I reply, cocking the autogun and taking aim at the lights. Your people will weep and your worlds will bleed, a voice from one of the battlesuits booms out, echoing off the surrounding buildings. You will not live to see the misery you have brought upon your people. This is it. We're all going to die, I think to myself. Suddenly, there's an explosion in one of the buildings to our right, and I see the bodies of Tau fire warriors being hurled, burning from the windows by the fireball. From out of the billowing smoke and flames strides a figure straight from legend. Something whispered about in military camps with awe, something dreaded by all enemies of the Emperor. I feel goosebumps prickle across my body. An angel of death, a space marine. Emperor's blood, curses Trost, eyes wide, his gun dropping from his fingers and clattering to the ground. Even the colonel darts a glance at Oriole, amazement in his eyes, before looking back at the advancing warrior. 2.5 meters tall and nearly a meter broad across the chest, the space marine towers over burning bodies scattered around him. Clad head to foot in black power armor, decoratively chased with metals that glint in the firelight, he advances onto the battlesuits. The red eyes of his helmet glow like a demon's as he turns his head towards the aliens. He looks just like the pictures and woodcuts I've seen, only even more impressive in real life. I make out an Inquisition symbol on his left shoulder pad, an eye, picked out in gleaming gold. In his left hand he carries a long power sword, gleaming blue in the darkness. In his right he carries a bolter and opens fire, the boom of the weapon resounding across the square. I can just make out the flickering trails of the bolts as they stream across the open ground, 3 of them impacting in quick succession on the closest of the battlesuits. The one whose flamer I destroyed earlier, tearing great gouges out of the armor and knocking it backwards. Still advancing steadily, the Space Marine opens fire again. 3 more shots, 3 more perfect hits that set off a chain reaction in the suit, causing it to explode in a shower of shrapnel and burning body parts of the pilot. The rest of the last chancers open fire on the Tau furthest from the Space Marine, and the other 2 turn towards the attacker. The cannon fire dims even the searchlights, and I see the shells converging on the Space Marine. Their impact would have shredded a normal man and hurled his bloody carcass a dozen meters, but a Space Marine is simply forced down onto one knee under the cannonade. Cracks and dents appear in his armor under the fusillade, and a shoulder pad goes spinning off, trailing sparks from the powered mounting. Unbelievably, the Space Marine pushes himself to his feet, ignoring the shells ripping up the ground around him and scoring across the breastplate, and returns fire, his bolts ripping through the burst cannon of the battle suits. For the Emperor! I hear him bellow in a voice like a god's. He tosses away his bolter and grabs the power sword, and, two-handed, breaking into a charge, his long strides covering the 3 meters every step, his boots crackling the concourse under the weight. The nearest battlesuit, now unarmed, takes a step back, readying himself for a jump, but somehow the Space Marine gets there before the jets fire, swinging the sword in a crackling arc that severs one of the battlesuit's legs and topples it to the ground. Without a pause, the Space Marine spins and delivers another blow, the glowing blade of a sword carving a massive rent in the body of the suit, shearing it wide open. The battlesuit the others are targeting launches itself into the air on a short trail of fire, its missile pod igniting as it does, the salvo screaming towards us on smoky trails. Get down! Warwick shouts, and I hurl myself to the floor, hands grasped over my head. The front wall of the building implodes inwards in a shower of shattered bricks and mortar dust, lumps of debris landing heavily on my back. I glance up and see Tanya at one of the windows, kneeling on one leg, her sniper rifle tucked right under her shoulder, aiming up into the air. Even as the dust settles around her, she fires a shot, ejects the spent casing, tracks further up, and fires again. All in all, she loses off 5 shots in the space of a few seconds. Something heavy crashes into the floor above us, sending more rubble tumbling down the stairway that runs down the wall behind us. The floorboards above give an ominous creak as we scatter, seconds before the disabled suit comes plummeting down through the ceiling, trailing sparking wires and plaster. It lands with a heavy thump on a cloud of dust and twitches mechanically. One leg juddering up and down, its rocket launcher erratically rotating left and right. I'm going after Coldwind, I snarl, my blood up. Someone shouts for me to stay, but I ignore them, running back out of the door, favoring my uninjured foot as the other drags along the ground slightly. I glance over my shoulder to see another battlesuit lying blazing in the middle of the square, the other jetting away, firing salvos of rockets at the Space Marine, who ducks down behind the cover of one of the ruined Tau war machines as explosions tear across the ground around him. I scan the buildings left and right, illuminated by the burning battlesuits, looking for some sign of Coldwind. Something tells me to move back the way we came in, and that's all that I hear, a noise in the building to my left. I instinctively dive to the ground a moment before a shot cracks out, the bullet punching cleanly through a wall just to my right. I roll onto my back and open fire, the autogun recoiling wildly in my hands as I blast the dark windows. I half get to my feet and hurl myself bodily over the wall, slumping to the ground on the other side. I check to see the weapon that I have. I've got about a half a magazine left, with one smoke grenade and 2 frag charges. What the hell was I thinking coming here on my own? I take a look over the wall and can't see any movement in the darkened buildings. Something does catch my attention a little bit further away. A wispy movement glimpsed down a narrow alley about 30 meters to my right. I head that way, keeping low behind the wall, ignoring the sharp stabs of pain from my foot every time I take a step. Getting to the end of the wall, about 20 meters from the alley, I vault over one-handed, the autogun in the other. Almost immediately, a ripple of fire from the building forces me into a sprint across the road, gritting my teeth to prevent a howl of pain escaping my lips. I slam into the wall of the alley and duck inside. Panting heavily, it continues straight for another 10 or 12 meters before turning sharply to the left, around the back of the low building with a corrugated sheet metal roof. I push myself forward, burning with a desire to exact some revenge from Coldwind. My head is thumping, my leg feels like it's on fire, but the anger in my heart is fanned to new heights as I think about the slimy, double-crossing ambassador. All along he intended this for us to happen. Of course, I would have done the same, but I would have made sure of it. Now he's going to have to pay the price for his failure. I stumble around the corner, almost running face first into a Tau fire warrior emerging from a door to my left. I react quicker, smashing my autogun across his face, snapping the helmet backwards. His rifle trembles from his grip, and I snatch it up. Behind him are three more fire warriors, but startled. They fail to act, and I pull the trigger. It has no kick at all. The heavy shell smashing straight through the closest Tau and punching straight next in line from his feet. The third brings up his rifle, but far too late. The next shot almost takes his head off completely, the body flopping messily to the ground. I step clumsily over the bodies and crash the doorway. Coldwind punches me across the chin, a weak blow that barely registers. I lash out with my good foot, kicking his legs from underneath him. He stares at me with no emotion. I place my boot on his chest and pin him down. You bit off more than you could chew this time, Ambassador, I say quietly, bringing the barrel of the rifle up to meet his face. I regret nothing, he replies calmly, meeting my gaze with a passionless expression. That's good. Nobody should die with regrets on their mind, I tell him. Sounds of sporadic gunfire outside attract my attention, but they soon quiet. Any other confessions to make? To clear your soul? All that I have done for the Tauva, he says evenly. I foresaw that I might die. I am not afraid. I have served the Tauva. We shall continue to grow. But why the double cross? I ask, curious. Why risk this happening? Why sour the deal? To teach you humans that your time has finished, he says with a short nod of amusement. You are old and decrepit, like the crumbling mansions your rulers inhabit. Your time has passed, and yet you so jealously cling on to the remnant of what you once had. We are superior. The Tauva is far superior to your dead emperor. You might be superior, but we've had a whole lot more practice. I grin at him, tossing the rifle to one side. I'm not going to shoot you. You are not? He replies, hope rising. No, I'm going to strangle you, I tell him, my voice dropping to a cold whisper. I grab him by the throat, and he tries to struggle, but his blows are feeble and undirected. I slam him against the wall, my fingers tightening around his neck. Your last sight is going to be that of a human throttling the life from you. I hope you enjoy it. You will all die. Victory will yet be mine, he gasps, smiling, and I drop to the floor. What do you mean? I demand, dragging him back to his feet. It appears that your pilot took the role of mercenary even better than you had intended, he says, hanging limply from my grip. You will never get off Estau alive. Neither will you, alien, I snarl, dashing his head against the wall, snapping his neck in a single blow. I drop him at the floor of the wall. I have to find the others, tell them about this change of plan. If they're heading to the pickup point, chances are that they'll be walking into a trap. Added to the fact that Quidlin got himself killed before shutting off the travel line power, this place could be swarming by Tau right now. Right now, I wonder if the Colonel's decision not to bring comlinks was a good idea. He'd been worried that any signals we made would be intercepted by the aliens. But it's no use worrying about what you haven't got, I remind myself. Just as I told the others back in training, I snatch up the Tau rifle and head for the front of the building, passing by a charred staircase to a short entrance hall. Easing the door open, I peek inside. There's no sign of the enemy. I haven't got a clue where I am. This isn't part of the setup. In the training bay, back on board the Lords of Glory, I decide to head back to the square to see if I can pick up some kind of trail from there. There's no way I'm getting off this planet alive if I try to do it alone. I manage to get back to the square without running into any more trouble and crouch in the devastated ruins of the building where I met the others, still smoking from the rocket bombardment. Flashes of light attract my attention, and I note the crackle of gunfire not too far off. I work my way stealthily around the edge of the square, carefully checking each building and street. A main boulevard, runs off opposite my position, and I can see flames burning in a building a couple of 100 meters down. Squinting against the light, I make out figures dashing across the wide road, their long, tapered helmets clearly marking them as Tau. Two of them are pitched off their feet by hits, and I hear two reports of a rifle echo around the quiet town. Scanning the buildings, I try to make out Tanya's position, as I guess she's the one picking off the enemy with such precision. All scruples obviously gone. I can't see her from here, though, and decide to break across the square, pausing to take cover by the remnants of the two destroyed battlesuits before running painfully to the far side. Moving slowly along the front wall of the building at the junction of the boulevard and square, I stop at the corner and look down the street. I can see a few Tau and the ominous shape of another battlesuit stalking past the burning building. In the firelight, I catch a movement in the doorway on the opposite side of the street and watch as a long barrel extends out of the shadows. There's a small flash and a bang, and one of the Tau is spun onto the ground by a clean hit to the chest. I see Tanya get up and move further down the street, hopping over an intervening wall and taking position on the wide steps leading up to the next building. I then across the road. I sprint across the road, head down, and land in a heap on the far side, trying to push myself further into the wall. Gasping now, feeling my broken ribs rubbing against the hinges, I edge along the wall, closing in on Tanya. She fires back again, and then moves back towards me. Keeping low and out of sight, I hiss her name, and she's about to back into a side road about 15 meters away, stopping her head in her tracks. Last chance, she hisses back urgently. I thought you were dead. Takes a lot to kill me, I tell her, moving out of cover and joining the others. The entrance to this chamber is just a few 100 meters this way, she says, pointing down the side street. The tower blocking the way out, though. I've been protecting their backs. More tower coming in through the opposite wall. We have to get them to pull back, I tell her. Strelly's sold us out. Damn, she curses, glancing over my shoulder towards the square. More battle suits. I look back and see it's true. 3 more huge shapes stand over the ruins of their commanders' vehicles, weapons tracking the buildings around the square. A cluster of drones hover around them, glowing slightly. Get to the others, she said, heading down the road. I can't believe the change in confidence in her. She seems calm, assured, almost enjoying herself. What made you finally take the shot? I ask, struggling alongside her. She looks over me and hooks my right arm over her shoulders, pulling me more upright. I realized it was him or you, she tells me, no hint of embarrassment. Never realized you care, I laugh back. I don't, she replies harshly. But it made me realize that brightsword would have killed hundreds, thousands more, just like you said, so I shot him. And, I prompt her, feeling she has something more to say. I just thought of all those people. The rest is easy, she admits. It gave me satisfaction, shooting at that monster. It always gets easier, Tanya. I agree with her, limping alongside the sniper. My name's Sharpshooter, she snaps back. You taught me that. It's what I do. I guess it is, I say, nodding in agreement. We run into Trost a couple of buildings further down the street. I tell him there's a change in plan as he leads us to the Colonel and Oriole. Standing with him is the Space Marine. He's even more impressive at this range. His head barely comes up over his chest. His armor is scratched, pitted, and cracked in dozens of places, but he doesn't seem to be bothered in the least. He whips round as we enter, power sword raised, throwing a blue glow across the room. Rounded panels of his black armor. Where the hell did he come from? I asked Trost as I limped towards Schaefer. Guess you weren't the only ones I was creating a diversion for, he replies, glancing nervously at the massive figure. Colonel, it's worse than you think, I gasp, my breath getting shorter and shorter. I think blood's getting in my lungs, and my own life fluid is slowly drowning me. I need medical attention, and I need it quick. Stradley cut a deal with Coldwind. He's not waiting for us. What? Coldwind admitted it before I killed him, I explained. There'll be no shuttle waiting for us at the transport terminal. The town will already have a heavy presence at the terminal, the colonel says after a moment's thought. He nods to Oriole. What other ways out of the dome are there, Inquisitor? None that won't be heavily guarded by now, he says, closing his eyes and rubbing the bridge of his nose as if he's got a headache. They're attacking. 3 squads, 2 battle suits, I hear Morik call from another part of the building. Trost, can you blast us a new exit? Oriole asks the ex-officio Sabatorian agent. Get me to the exterior wall, and Demolition Man can make you a door, he snarls back, patting his bag of explosives. Right. Everyone, pull out, the colonel barks. The wall to this chamber is only 100 meters away. We will blast our way out of here into the next arena. On the other side of that is the outer dome. The tower coming in every direction, Tanya points out. They'll be after us like hounds at the chase. I will hold the breach, the Space Marine says, his deep voice given a metallic ring by his external vocalizers of his helmet. No, brother Dionys, you are needed to ensure the Inquisitor is safe. Still hero, eh? I say, pushing past Morik. You're welcome to it. Inquisitor? Dionysus asks for confirmation, his helmeted head turning towards Oriole, red eyes glowing in the gloom. What are your orders? We all leave this damned city, head for the open ground of the next arena, he confirms, striding towards the door, chainsword in hand. Morik can act as rear guard. Give him your spare magazines and power cells. We move fast. Don't wait for stragglers. We file out of the building, looking very cautiously. I see squads of Tau running parallel to us, down the other streets, closing in on our position. A plume of jets heralds the arrival of more battlesuits as they land on the roof of a high building, maybe a couple of 100 meters to our right. Move out, the colonel whispers. Like shadows, we ghost down the dark streets. Dionys, on point. His power sword dimmed for the moment. He moves swiftly, despite his bulky power armor. Tanya helps me along, her sniper rifle slung over her shoulder. Not the best weapon for a close-range firefight, anyway. I grasp the alien weapon in both hands, ready to fire in an instant. From building to building, we flit, pausing at every corner, glancing behind us regularly. It takes us a couple of minutes to reach the wall of the huge chamber, which stretches into the fake night sky above us. Okay, Demolition Man, get us an opening, I say, patting him on the back. Meanwhile, the others pass their spare clips to Morik, who gathers them in his pack, which he slings over his shoulder. Melt a bomb, step back, I hear Tross say, and we move away from the wall a couple of paces. There's a rapid succession of bright glows, and a section of the wall falls away, just lower than head height. Light pours to the other side, blinding us after the false night of the mock Sarkassa town. Sorry, big fella, Tross says with a shrug as Dionysus crouches down to look at the small hole. It is of no concern, trooper, the Space Marine replies, straightening up again. He raises a booted foot bigger than my head and kicks at the wall. Twice more, his heavy boot crashes against it, dislodging a cracked chunk of rubble, which nearly doubles the height of the hole. Without a word, the Space Marine ducks in through, his power sword glowing again. A scream in the air attracts our attention, and I see the trails of half a dozen rockets arcing over the buildings towards us. Oriole and Colonel dive through the hole next, followed by Tanya, Trost, and then me. Morik backs through the hole, firing now at targets we can't see. Something special for you, I say, dropping an object into his pack. He grunts without turning, and I set off for the others, who are running over the dusty dunes to the next training area. I crest the nearest hillock and realize that we're in some kind of ash wastes, the gray expanse stretching out in every direction. It'll be a killing field. No real cover if the Tau catch us in here. Run for all you're worth, shouts Oriole, scrabbling up the next dune. I hear muffled explosions and look up. The ceiling high above our heads seems to shake. Motes of dust start drifting down. I pay it no heed, preferring to concentrate on pushing myself through the sliding dust and ash of the battleground. Another explosion at ground level, and behind us heralds the detonation of the charge I placed in Morik's ammo bag. What the hell was that? Tanya asks, stopping and glancing back over my shoulder. I see a large portion of the wall shattered and collapsing, crushing the Tau battlesuits underneath the artificial avalanche. Insurance, I tell her, dragging her back into a run. Morik was never going to hold them off for more than a heartbeat. Still, he did make for a good booby trap. You're a cold bastard, she says, letting go of me and hauling herself ahead. Actually, I call after her, dropping my hands to my knees and crawling up the dune. I'm not cold. I enjoyed that. So how much explosive to get through? Oriole asks Trost, as the demolitions expert examines the wall. Thought I'd use everything I've got, he replies, stepping back after placing the last of the explosives against the wall. We exchange bemused glances and begin to back away across the dunes, breaking into a run as Trost picks up speed and accelerates past us. Looking back into an artificial ash waste, I see battlesuits soaring in the air about a half a kilometer away and to our left. Do it now, the colonel yells, and we all dive into the ground except for Dionys, who simply goes down on one knee and turns so that his remaining shoulder pad shields his head. The detonation seems to build in volume as the secondary bombs go up, rising to a deafening crescendo that's joined by the screech of tortured metal. A blast wave passes over me, scorching the hairs on the back of my head and fluttering my clothes around me. There's a dull rumble, and I look back, seeing a crack splitting up the dome wall. Oh, frag, I mutter to myself, painfully getting to my feet. Run! Screams Trost, breaking to a sprint, and we race after him as the crack widens, showering chunks of the dome down into the grit and dust. My legs burn with pain as I force myself through the clogging dunes, pieces of debris dropping around us. Gritting my teeth, I urge myself on even faster, dragging my feet on one in front of the other. I slip and start to slide down the dune, but someone grabs the back of my shirt. Dionys hauls me up in one hand as he runs past, plowing through the dust like a tank, his arms and legs pumping ceaselessly. A massive triangular section of the dome begins to fall inwards, crashing down and sending up billowing clouds of dust and ash, which sweeps over us, engulfing us in a rolling wave of air that buffets even the Space Marine's grip. Okay, put me down, I yell at Dionys, who slides to a halt and dumps me in a heap in the ash, making me cough and sputter, sending a stab of pain from my broken ribs. We turn and head for the gorge, blown out of the wall, stretching some 30 meters above our heads in a jagged wedge. The tower closing in. Shots begin to send up plumes of dust around us as we scramble over the shattered rubble, floundering through the nearly created drifts of ash. Just then, something flashes inside, through the opening, a bolt of light that catches one of the battlesuits in mid-jump, turning it into a fiery ball of slag. What the frag? I exclaim, dragging myself over a jagged piece of debris and looking out through a massive rent in the dome wall. Outside is a war zone, and no mistake. Small tall buildings stretch into the desert from this side of the dome, some of them reduced to rubble, others burning. Explosions light up the sky all around the townscape as Imperial dropships plummet groundwards, bombs and missiles heralding their approach, cratering the wide roads and smashing the buildings to pieces. Imperial guardsmen are running everywhere, fighting with Tau fire warriors in battlesuits. A hammerhead tank glides into view, its nose-mounted cannons chattering wildly, mowing down a squad of guardsmen advancing through the burning ruins of a Tau building. I look over at Oriole as a platoon of guardsmen run past dressed in mismatched uniforms, carrying all sorts of weapons. One of them sets up a las cannon, steadying it on a tripod, before firing again at the Tau. The bolt of energy going wide this time. The tower returning fire, explosions ripping across the ground towards us. We break into a run, and I find myself next to the Inquisitor. You know anything about this? I ask him, knowing the answer already. More forces I had in orbit, just in case Coldwind got a sudden rush of intelligence, he says with a smile, which changes to a wince as rockets explode close by, showering us with dust and pieces of rock. We're not safe yet, and as we make it out in the open, it's no safer here than inside. There are aliens everywhere, squadrons of battlesuits advancing from the left. The fire warriors spilling out of the back of 3 hovering APCs to our right. Make for the open ground. More dropships will be landing, the colonel tells us, or Oriel tells us, pointing to a gap, 2 shattered buildings just ahead. We dash from cover to cover, through the crossfire between the 2 forces, and as much danger from friendly fires from the Tau. We run into a squad setting up a communications unit in the shell of a cracked Tau dome, a small subsidiary building, only 7 or 8 meters high. I recognize the officer in charge. It's the leader of the mercenaries who we met at the bar, still wearing his white armband. Well, Emperor damn my soul, he laughs, seeing us. I suggest you stick to starting barroom brawls in the future. Captain Drestian, I presume? Oriel says, nodding to the officer. I am Inquisitor Oriel of the Ortozenos. I believe you have been waiting for me? When I got the signal to start the assault, I could barely believe it, he declares, serious now, folding his muscled arms across his chest. His jaw drops as Dionysus strides in past us. Well, if I ain't seen it all now. Out of the blasted doorway, I can see the open desert surrounding the battle dome, now littered with dropships. As more troops land, dozens and dozens of men and women pouring down the gangways. Tank carriers land, their heavy ramps dropping quickly. Lehman Russ rumble out of the holds, their battle cannons turning towards the Tau force as soon as their tracks hit the sand. There's a rush of air, and the sand is billowing up toward the ground, only a few dozen meters away, as dropships land close by. We'll have enough fighting. We've had enough fighting for one day, and I need a rest. We'll commandeer that dropship and get back into orbit. It'll be safer in orbit? Tanya asks. I thought Brightsword had a fleet. The fleet's already left, and we have forces boarding the 2 orbital stations as we speak. I just want to know where that bastard Strelly is, barks Trost, face screwed up in anger. Don't worry about that traitor, Oriel assures us, his eyes hard. There's a tracker on the shuttle, and we'll find him soon enough. The Inquisitor smiles humorlessly for a second before we start striding towards the newly arrived shuttle. As we wait for the squad to disembark, another 2 ships land close by, and soon the air is filled with a choking, roiling dust cloud and the whine of engines powering down. I step on the now empty ramp, following the others, and look around. The fight between the guard and the Tau has mostly moved inside the battle dome. Turning away, I notice the smoke rising from the main city in a dozen places, and look up to see the vapor trails of planes returning to orbit. I get to the top of the ramp and look back, squinting through the light and swirling sand, my eyes tired, my head fuddled with fatigue and pain. I swear I see an illusion. Leading the squad out of the next dropship is a woman with short cropped hair, pure white hair, and pale skin, dressed in various shades of brown desert camo. She looks just like Lori, but Lori died at Court Norum. She and her squad disappeared from view behind the other dropship, and I'm about to set off after her when the ramp begins to rise. I turn, and Oriel is stood there, watching the battle. Was that who I think it was? I ask him as the door shuts with a clang and the dropship begins to rumble up with a build of power. I have no idea what you're talking about, Oriel replies, meeting my gaze steadily. I just saw Lori, I confess, or I think I did. But you are the only survivor from Court Norum, he points out. That's true, I agree, stumbling along the gangway into the main compartment. I flop down on the seat and begin to buckle myself into the safety harness, stowing the Tau rifle as a souvenir under the bench. Oriel walks past, and and is just about to go through the other door when something occurs to me. I thought you died at Court Norm as well, I call out to him. You escaped the second shuttle. Yes, I did, he answers curtly before closing the door behind him. The next day, back aboard the ship and all patched up with a good night's sleep, I feel much better. Happy, in fact. The bad guys got killed and the last chancers did their job. So it's with a sense of satisfaction that I make my way to the others in the officers' lounge for a debriefing by Oriole and the colonel. We enter the wide oval room, gawking at the splendor of the wood, and the thick red carpet underfoot, and the low velvet-colored chairs. Oriole is waiting for us, standing in front of a bookshelf, looking at the volumes. We settle in the seats as the colonel walks in from another door and nods for us to do so. There's no sign of Dionysus. He's disappeared into the forward chamber of the shuttle without a word, as we left Estau, and none of us has seen him since. Oriole turns, a smile on his face. Well, last chance, he addresses us. Well, last chancers, he addresses us, looking at each of us in turn. By my reckoning, a complete success. He paces away from the bookshelf and stands in the center of the room. As you have probably guessed, you have been caught up in a game of sorts, he tells us, becoming serious. It is a game that I and other members of the Inquisition must play on a daily basis. It is a deadly game, not just for us, but for others, like yourselves, who are ultimately the pieces we play with. Yesterday we won the game, and that is important for some of you. That will be the only time you are involved. For others, he looks at the colonel and then at me, you shall be asked to play it again, perhaps. Excuse me, Inquisitor, Trost asks, raising a hand. I like the fancy speech, but could you just tell me what the frag this was all about? This is more than just offing some rogue commander, wasn't it? The Inquisitor doesn't answer straight away, but instead looks at us, lips pursed. He strokes his head a couple of times and then looks at us, weighing us up again. He glances at the colonel before speaking again. You will be sworn to secrecy anyways. You have done well, and I cannot see what harm it will do for any of you to know a little more. You're right, this is more than simply a matter of preventing Ovar from invading the Sarkassa system, though that did provide me with a reason for instigating a much wider scheme and killing two birds with one bullet, so to speak. I notice Oriole's smooth talking has returned, a contrast to the tired and anxious Inquisitor who fled the battle dome with us. The Tau are a threat to our future, and this part of the galaxy, he explains, pacing up and down, is a threat that we are unable to deal with fully at the time. Other pressing matters, such as the advance of Tyranid High Fleet Kraken, draw away the military resources which we would need to wage war on the Tau Empire. That much is true, as you've been told before. The Tau are not keen to start a serious military engagement with the Imperium either. That much is also true. However, they had the upper hand. They thought that we would not combat the spread of their empire in this sector. Without the intervention, we could not. However, by their own complicity in the assassination of Commander Brightsword, they provided me with a golden opportunity to give them an object lesson in the nature of the foe they face. They think they are clever, learning tricks of manipulation from the Eldar, but they are young. The Imperium may not be perfect, but it does have one thing they do not have: experience. For countless generations, inquisitors such as myself have been fighting against the menace of alien expansion and the invasion of our worlds. Over those long centuries and millennia, we have learned a trick or two. To put it bluntly, we're sneakier than they could hope to be given the right conditions. So, what have we actually done except start a war with them? Something you say we can't afford to do, asks Tanya, voicing my own thoughts. Tau is just an outpost, little more than a firecast staging operation area for Ovar and his warriors, Oriole answers, picking his words carefully. The loss of Tau, which, by the way, should be called Skull's Breach, and is marked on our own star charts until they took it from us, is not a major blow to the Tau Empire, except in one regard. No longer can they encroach upon our territory without reproach. No longer can they be certain that we won't respond to their aggressive advances into our space. We can't hold back the expansion of the Empire with might and guns, not in the straightforward sense, but we can make them pause to think, perhaps to turn their attention elsewhere, to easier areas to colonize, which do not belong to us yet. We have sent them a message that they will have to pause for consideration for. That was my larger purpose in this enterprise. I wanted Brightsword dead, make no mistake about that, but not to stop him from invading Sarcassa. I wanted him dead so that the chain of command was broken, so the Tau were disrupted, so their attention was focused on the battle dome, and not on half a dozen Imperial transports in orbit, packed with guard masquerading as renegades and mercenaries. Even now, 3,000 more troopers are landing on the surface, eliminating the resistance that remains. His smile returns, and he gestures to the colonel, who picks up two scrolls from a desk to one side of the room. Pardons. I can recognize them from before. Truly, you have earned the redemption in the eyes of the Emperor, Oriel tells us, his smile broadening in a genuine grin. Truly have you earned the right to live again as free servants of the Emperor. You did not assassinate an alien yesterday. You conquered a world. I watched attached as the colonel hands out our parchments, clearing Trost and Tanya of all crimes. Just the two of them remain from the 8 I had picked up half a year ago. Those are the two survivors. And I smiled to myself, glad I kept my promise to Tanya to keep her alive. I hope she enjoys the next sunrise. Then my heart goes heavy. It's all over again. I'm going back to prison. No pardon for sorry old Cage. November 14, 3889, 13th Penal Legion. Now I give a not that I'd give a damn about that. I wasn't expecting one. No, my mind's on something else. I walk over to Oriel, where he stood by the bookshelf again. When I accused you of being a witch, why did you say that I of all people should not judge? I ask. You're intelligent, Cage. You'll work it out for yourself, he says, not looking at me. What does that mean? I demand, making him turn around and look at me. When you're back in your cell, you'll have time to think about it, is all he says, tapping the side of his head before walking off. The air is filled with swirling gray dust, whipped into a storm by a wind that shrieked across the hard black granite of the tower. The bleak edifice soared into the turbulent skies, windowless but studded with hundreds of blazing lights whose yellow beams were swallowed quickly into the dust storm. For 300 meters, the tower climbed into the raging skies of Govel's third moon, an almost perfect cylinder of unbroken and unforgiving rock, hewn from the infertile mesa on which the gulag stood. A narrow-beamed red laser sprang into life from its summit, penetrating the gloom of the cloud-shrouded night. A moment later, it was answered by a triangle of white glares as the shuttle descended towards the landing pad. In the bathing glow of the landing lights, technicians scurried back and forth across the pad, protected against the violent climate in bulky worksuits made from fine metal mesh, their hands covered with heavy globes, thick-soled boots along their feet. With a whine of engines cutting back, the shuttle's 3 feet slouched down with a loud clang on the metal decking in the landing area. A moment later, a porthole on the side swung open, and a docking ramp jerkily extended itself under the hissing hydraulics to meet with the hatchway. A tall figure ducked to the low opening and stepped into the walkway. He stood there for a moment, his heavy dress coat whipping around him, a gloved hand clattering off his officer's cap to his head. With his back as straight as a rod despite the horrendous conditions, the new arrival strode across the docking gantry with a purposeful gait, never once breaking his gaze from straight ahead. Behind him, another figure emerged from the shuttle, swathed in a ragged uniform, his head and face bared to the elements, seemingly oblivious to the serious dust storm. His face was pitted and scarred with dozens of cuts and fleshy craters, his scalp bearing a particularly horrendous wheal just behind the left ear. He walked with a slight limp, As he followed the officer more slowly, looking around him at his surroundings, he caught up with the other man in the small elevator chamber where a nervous guard stood. When the warden saw the scarred man, his eyes widened in surprise. He glanced at the officer in the heavy coat before fixing his gaze on the newly arrived prisoner. The guard gulped heavily and shuffled nervously back a pace. The prisoner turned and winked. "Don't worry," the man said, a savage grin, wrinkling his many scars. "I won't be here forever."